Welcome everybody to another one of my episodes, and today I am, as you all know, delighted to have the intriguing Wes, the Meep Pennock, all the way from San Antonio, Texas. I met Wes through the Sales Boards way back when, so even though Wes and I have never actually met in person, I feel like he's a brother from another mother. And this could go many different directions. This conversation. There's a good 10 years in terms of age difference between myself and Wes. Those of you watching, I'm definitely the older one. And yeah, so what we were going to unpack today is, God, I hate that term. Clean your mouth out with soap. What we're going to discuss today is kind of the future state of sales. And Wes comes at this from a very technical, dare I say it, perspective, because if you look at Wes's headline, it's making custom internal tooling easy. But enough of me waffling on. Wes, over to you. Do you want to give a little bit of background info to your experience, who, what, why, when, where, and then we can see.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I started out as a programmer like 10 years ago. I started down the rabbit hole when I was 16. I'm now 27. Yes, Father Time, it continues to march on, and I feel that every day. I can only go to the gas station 3 times in the day now instead of the usual 5 because of America. Now, but I started in sales back in 2018, 2019 with startups on r/startups on r/co-founders. And what I've ran into is a lot of founders have great ideas, but when you put a CEO, CTO that has an engineering background in a sales motion, the number one frustration they have is, I built it, what more work is there to be done? I'm like, my child, my sweet summer child. Again, why do you think Oracle is everywhere? Do you think a bunch of programmers convinced the DoD to work with them? You know that's wrong. I know that's wrong. You need to work with sales, whether you like them or not. But
I love your turn of phrases. And again, with respect to the audience, just work with us on this. If Wes goes off on one, it's totally fine. It all comes back to some logical viewpoints at some point. So you started out life as a programmer, so you went down the technical route. Why then? And I know that you're an independent consultant, so you're out there kind of earning your graft the hard way, living and breathing the dream that I did for 5 years ago. So what was it that made you move to that switch into a kind of a sales role from a technical program role? Because if what is to be believed out there, like full stack developers are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of what they do, programmers are now paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to what they do. And yes, of course you can make good money in sales, but it's effing hard work. So what was the switch, if you will? And those that are listening versus watching, if you're hearing tapping in the background, it's because Wes is multitasking, no doubt building the Death Star at the same time.
Exactly. I'm using a Cherry MX Blue. Royal Blues off some Kali switches on a custom board that I built myself. So that's a thing. So really, the reason is point blank. It's twofold. One of them is that, again, my last experience as a programmer, I nearly got arrested because somebody lied to the Fed, the American Air Force. And that's not all that uncommon in programming anymore, whether anyone likes to admit that or not. But 2, it's basically, I wanted to change. Like, look, as a programmer, you're always expected to keep up with the latest trends. And while that's certainly true in sales, it's a lot easier to digest an entirely new methodology in a weekend from a seminar than it is having to go through a tutorial, having to set up a dev environment, having to build projects, and then having to convince non-technical people that you know what you're talking about in the recruiting process. This is infinitely easier than any of that.
So if I then reflect on, you said you got into sales kind of 2017, 2018, was it? 2018, 2019?
2019 is when I started going on r/startups and r/co-founders. 2019, the week of Christmas, I had a conversation with a man by the name of Ryan Matonis. And for all that you are wondering, yes, that Ryan Matonis, the one that works with the Beard and Ricer, which I never thought I would ever have a conversation with him after that conversation we had that spring. But yeah, that's why.
That's why. Okay, cool. So there's some people in there that have influenced you to make this move. And so you moved into sales then at the wrong time when the world was closing in on all of us, as it were. But then the argument could be that actually your skill set and the kind of the viewpoint that you are bringing to the market also is actually what the world of sales and marketing kind of realizes that they need. Now, if I look back when I first moved to sales in 2003, I think I started out my Realtor job as my first job before moving into recruitment. Back then, it was a far simpler approach. You had a phone, you had a computer, a vague thing called the internet. LinkedIn was just kind of there, if you will. Facebook wasn't even really a thing. Social selling didn't really exist. So all one did was bash the phones and hope for the best.
Hope for the
best. I was fortunate that I worked for an internationally recognized recruitment brand, so they did a very good branding perspective at that stage. Now, I've heard of Michael Page. I've never heard of you, but I've heard of Michael Page. So that actually gave me the extra, if I'm going to take the Jerry Hill kind of approach, 27 seconds license to have the phone call. Fast forward to where we are today in terms of the world of sales. For me, it seems like we're over complicating things. We're relying too much on technology. We believe that automation is going to be the panacea to all of this, and we know that's not to be
true. As much as I want that to be true, and as I would hope, the problem fundamentally is you are throwing tools like Outreach, Sales Loft, whatever. I'm not going to get into GUIs because frankly that doesn't matter. It's the idea. It's you're throwing non-technical users at, quite frankly, some of the most technical stacks I've ever seen outside of doing Docker and web development in and of itself with AWS on the back end. And you're expecting them to understand what to do. And I'm like, I can teach them sales theory all day, but if I have to teach them how to use your tool is getting in the way of them making money. And you can't dance around that any longer. Okay.
So that's an interesting point then, in terms of, because I've never used a sales loft, I've never used an outreach. I'm au fait with CRM systems, but to your point, I don't really care how they work. I just need them to pretty much work out the box, and I'm intuitive enough to know, well, I want it to be able to do this, this, and this, because that's the output I'm trying to achieve. So and I guess this dovetails into kind of what Justin Michael's talking about in his book with Tony Hughes. What you're saying or suggesting is that the technology out there is almost becoming too technical and complex for the person that's going to be, in theory, leveraging it to help them achieve what they're trying to do, which is fundamentally hit quota.
Right. And it's not even that tools are bad, but tools for the sake of tools is idiotic. Like, look, if it were up to me and my current org was okay with it, I would run, an old school, Gentoo or Slackware, or maybe an old school Arch terminal interface, get it done, log out, done. But it's when it's basically, no, this is your life now. And I'm like, no, my job is to make money. The tool helps me make money. If it gets in the way of me making money, I don't want it and I don't need it.
So where do we, looping this back to kind of the future state of sales is going to be, we can't walk away from the fact that it is going to be tech powered then. So what?
Oh, absolutely.
What needs to, and from your perspective in terms of a technical programmer, so where you go, my pay grade in terms of, I said, I don't really care how the stuff works. I just want it to work and be easy to use. Where do we believe that this is going if we accept the great resignation is happening, if we accept that there seem to be SDR roles, thousands of them that are being hired, the valuations that these organizations are perceived valuations.
Okay, yes, that is the correct phrase. Yes.
Where and yet we're asking of people who aren't technical to try and build this technical solution into fundamentally hitting quota, making money, yada, yada, yada. Where do you see this going? Does something need to kind of happen? Something needs to go pop, like almost like a market needs to go pop, something needs to break in order for this to kind of hit reset, or is it a bit like an oil tanker? We're just kind of slowly turning that way anyway. It's just going to take time.
So 2 fundamental thoughts. First, the change has already begun. A lot of SDRs are now pushing back. And again, real estate, we talk insurance again. I've had conversations with Chad over his thing many times. And one of the things I constantly hear is SDRs are tired of being told, hey, we don't have a CRM, we don't have tools, but go make dials and hope to God it works. People are saying no. However, there are also other people on the other side of the fence saying, you guys are asking me to manage 5 to 10 different tools. I thought you wanted me to do sales. You want me to do tool management. And so what I think is going to happen is those that are actually interested in getting all the tools are going to go to companies that are willing to pay for that. Yeah. Those that just want to do sales are going to go to the old school niche. Like a guy like me who, when I was selling, would be able to do 150, 250 a dials, either connect and sell or call tools or whatever. We'll go to places where that's not normal. We'll crush it. And then at 5 o'clock, turn off the phone. Then there are others who want to work with the startup SaaS world, like your Outplace, like, even Jason over at Orem. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the divide is coming and it's already starting. There are those that subscribe to the idea that a rep must fundamentally be tech-enabled. And that's correct. However, it's the rep's level of comfort with the enablement that will be the deciding factor going forward. Because look, you can spend, as you well know, we talked with Shane, tens of thousands of pounds on tech. But if you have a rep that doesn't get it, using it, that's not going to save that person. It's not. And that's the thing that a lot of people are going to have a conversation with this. I can give you hundreds of $1,000s worth of tools, but I can't teach you on it. And that's the conversation that starts leveling up.
So that then, I guess, presents a challenge in some respects, because who
oh yeah, management has never been harder than it is right now.
Who then is at fault? Is it the rep isn't curious enough to want to learn? Is it there isn't sufficient, and I don't know where we are in sales enablement, sales effectiveness, revenue operation use, revenue intelligence in terms of that community, is that not equipped to enable the seller? Are we hiring? Are we going after the wrong people? Do we need to reinvent the role of the SDR AE completely?
Jesse, as much of a zealot as he is, and rightfully so at times, I think he's actually right. I believe that there's going to be 2 sets of reps. The frontline reps that are going to be the guys who go in there, dial like crazy, email like crazy, and all that other stuff. And then there's going to be a secondary SDR rep who's going to be the strategist who's understanding how the tooling works and how to maximize it. And they're not necessarily not going to be Rev Ops, because Rev Ops is the overall org strategy, not the SDR level. And you're talking about personal failings. We're beyond that. Every day beyond the year 1999 that Salesforce is still on the board, it's a failing of everyone else around there. Because bluntly put, Salesforce shouldn't have seen past the 2000s. Again, Aaron's magic. Yeah. Aaron was magic. He still is. Him in his castle, right? Which I can only laugh at mildly because that's still funny. But really, it's that there isn't a failure on either side. Okay. Thinking of stuff as a failure is well, frankly, old and archaic. It's not a failure so much as it's not adjusted yet to the modern vogue. We've got to align people with the modern vogue, because I don't necessarily think that, there are objectively bad reps. Yes, I'm not debating that. But to say that it's on the rep side of management or tech side, that's extremely short-sighted. Because look, you can keep throwing bodies, but at a certain point, word's going to get out. For a lot of the companies that I've dealt with in the past, word did get out, and then we can hire.
So, and that's an interesting concept, which is I'm starting to hear more and more of this, and I reflect on a podcast I did, crikey, 6 months ago, might have been longer, with Patrick and Justin, and kind of Patrick's view was that it's going to take a brave CRO, CMO, wherever this ultimately rolls up into, CEO even, MD, small business, large business, that fundamentally it's almost that you want to act like a pod in a positive sense, not the negative pods on LinkedIn, but start to reskill the sales and marketing function, if you will, around, okay, we need somebody who's really good technically, to your point. We need somebody who's really good at social. We need somebody who's really good at picking up the phone. Somebody who's really good at writing email copy. Somebody who email copy / sequences plus maybe someone who's good at marketing, branding type sort of thing. So 4 or 5
I need a string, I need a Patrick, and I need an Eric, in that order.
And then it's there's your number. Go away for 12 months almost. That's the number you need to go and achieve. You as a team, as a collective, if you will, go and make that however you think is the best way to make that. Here is the tooling or the technology to support you to do this. If you haven't got what you need, come and tell us, and we'll try and figure out a way to deliver this. The challenge, I guess, with that, I buy into that buy into that viewpoint, because it's almost a quasi consultant. Consulting's got its own challenges, but consulting world is go find a bunch of bright people in the business who believe in what you do and go and make it happen type sort of thing, wherever those people sit, which typically, diversity of thought, diversity of kind of skill sets to deliver that, the whole way that is delivered, and time and line and your separate conversation. But that then starts to kind of challenge the status quo of month on month, quarter by quarter quota. I reflect on conversations with Marcus Kalki around, if we're going to truly drive long-term customer value, reps should be rewarded, or the team should be rewarded.
Well, actually, so this is one of those, this is truly off the cuff wild, but I think somebody needs to say it. You need reps focused on the short term, you need reps focused on the midterm, and then you need reps focused on the long term. And if you're going to start asking for that from an org, that's fine, but you need to silo those functions. And asking one rep to constantly context switch within the actual tool every day, that's why they don't want to do it. That's the real reason, but nobody wants to talk about that.
Is that not what's meant to happen now, with kind of SDR hand over to AE hands over to customer success? Is that not meant to be what happens?
So this is where, again, I'm in the minority. SDR AE, okay, that was useful in the 90s, maybe even up to the early 2000s. But if you're telling me that people aren't full cycle, especially with the level of knowledge that these modern SaaS tools require to sell, I'd ask, why? Give me a good reason why they shouldn't be the face of the company through the entire exchange. I want somebody to tell me why.
I'm on the same page as you. I reflect on my recruitment days way back when. So we're early mid 2000s. Mid 2000s, 2005.
Raimi Spider-Man time. Yeah,
it was. I was hiring salespeople. I was hiring salespeople into the IT and tech sector. There are 3 roles you hired, or 3 questions you asked if somebody came in, which is this net new business, is this account management, or is this channel? And that was kind of it, really, in terms of the type of role that it was. And the new business got paid more effectively, dare I say it, in terms of got lower base but higher OTE, because they were going out and being the hunters. You then had the account management team, which were given a set of accounts, and their role was very much to grow and farm, cross-sell, upsell within that organization. And then you had the channel sales, which was go and form the partnership and the alliance with your third-party people to sell with, to then go and build that channel accordingly. That was
right.
And it was always net new's hardest, but biggest reward. Farm is slightly easier, and channel's a piece of piss. Fundamentally, you're just getting other people to build a relationship with you. And again, I talked about this earlier. I remember when LinkedIn were trying to change my AE after year one, I said, no, I've spent the best part of 12 months building a relationship with this person. He knows this from the inside out. I'm not having this handed over because I haven't got time to build this all. And eventually they agreed to it.
Right.
So why do we feel that seems to be such a difficult conversation? I don't know if difficult is the right way, but why is that not being, why are we in the minority still in that conversation, do we feel?
Because that screams the elephant in the room that so many people are openly afraid of talking about is, and this is just where, again, I know AEs, like my AE for Jester, he's a hunter. I don't have to tell him to go look for stuff. I don't have to tell him to do his job. He does his job. The blunt answer is you got AEs that want to be order takers. And if that's your case, I don't know if you belong in sales.
So, yeah, granted. So to that end, is that then, would they, I hate the word term pivot, but could that existing construct move into more of a longer term reward? Or do you feel that, well, I know we're talking broad brushstroke here,
right,
thanks to people in AEs and this and that, but do you feel that longer term play, fundamentally the person's still got to go out and prospect, still got to go out and find the new opportunity, still got to do it? It's just the longer term sales cycles, longer term play versus the shorter sales cycles, it's just shorter sales cycles, right?
Right, and that is a part of the elephant, but that's not the elephant. The real elephant is people don't know how to pay salespeople outside of the AE and SDR model. And whenever you start bringing that up, the bean counters get scared because you begin to realize how inefficient that model is. And if that becomes the case, and full cycle becomes the norm, cap tables, everything changes. And the reason why it's slowly happening is because people are accepting the fact that we can't go back, and this is our new norm. And we have to have those conversations about, because never before have people so openly, bluntly, and directly talked about comp before. And what a lot of people are realizing is they're asking me to put in all this work for such a little amount. And again, this is where we're going to talk just pure hedonism for a minute about human condition. I can go work over there and make, 10, 15% more or do less. I'm going to take that. And I'm not going to blame anybody for that. And the sales cycle has to be made aware of that because it chooses not to be sometimes,
It's, and I'm certainly, the reward conversation is starting to become more prevalent on our side, which I believe is an interesting one. I think, and I think this is actually outside, this is beyond sales, this is beyond the sales role. This is just generally because what the last 2 years, to all intents and purposes, I think for a lot of people has kind of reset what is important. And
values.
Okay, I just want to, I need to earn, I just don't want to pay my bills. I want to be able to pay the rent, I want to be able to pay the mortgage, I want to be able to do things that I enjoy. I want time with my family. We know we're never going to hit those big freaking numbers. Some people do, okay. And even I reflect on, a training program I did 5 years ago, where somebody from a sales leader from Oracle was talking about, even when we try to shift the commission to help the sellers sell stuff that was more profitable, but the deal size was smaller, they still went for the whales. Even if $1 million deal was not profitable, they would get kind of lauded as this person is the best salesperson in the world because they sold $1 million of revenue, even though that was potentially loss making to the company. And
actually, I do have some thoughts on that. Everyone wants to tout the amount of money sold for the company. My blunt question is what do you care? No. The only number you should concern yourself with is how much did I get? That's the only number that matters at the end of the day. How many zeros hit my bank account? I'm all for making a company look good. I'm all for building pedigree. I'm all for any of that. But at the end of the day, is it in my wallet? If not, okay, cool. But again, I'm very blunt about that with people.
But therein lies, I guess, the tension that I guess HR, finance, L&D is gonna face, because fundamentally I'm coin operated. It's from my blood, from my late father who was in sales. I kind of understand the more what that brings, the risk that brings with it. But I guess there's a generation. I hate putting people in the boxes, but there's a generation coming through, and the new generation coming through in the broad sense. That's not necessarily what makes them tick. Now, there is debate in terms of entitlement, and there has to be a bit of give and take in this. Around sales is not easy, so there has to be something that you've got to have a will to at least engage, talk, deal with rejection, to go through a process and emotion. No matter what sales motion you fundamentally follow, they all come down to the same thing at the end of the day. There is no silver bullet. Trust me, I'm trying to find it in this. So there is kind of that aspect, but I also do get the sense that there is starting to be this shift, that the way that the overall construct of sales is, and I'm talking, we're talking traditional kind of sales is done, has to be done a little bit differently. And I believe we're also now in a world where that is more and more eminently achievable based on the technology solutions we have, but also the access to data that B2B now has, either your own data, possibly third-party data points, but also HR data, well-being data, to start to drive more broad insight to help support, especially if you've got remote sales functions, which is going to be for a while, right? And I'm not talking about in terms of data, in terms of stalking you and around you weren't on at this time or that time,
but to see how they're doing, like at a certain point, you can throw money, you can throw cars, you can throw dinners, you can throw whatever you want at a person, but if that doesn't make them tick, things are going to start to go screwy really quickly. And now the HR and legal and all these other people are aware that this is an actual thing. You got to imagine they're wondering, okay, this is, let's see, if we're doing an American and we're saying the base of an SDR, whatever, 45, 55, and adding insurance, this is at least a six-figure engagement. How are we hedging our bets? And how do we do that respectfully and tastefully? When, quite frankly, worker-employee relationships have never been worse. In part because r/anti worked, and you'll have a whole generation that now knows the powers of means. And it's got to be weird to be in their shoes right now.
Do we think that this is partly born out of technology, is part to blame in? Is blame the right word? So I get the sense at the moment through automation, email outreach, dials made, whatever it is, automation on social, blah, blah, blah. That we just do more. We need more people to operate the machine to spit more out, and then we'll eventually get to where we want to get to just by doing more of the same. Is that part and parcel that we've been sold the dream by these companies, where the dream isn't actually reality, quelle surprise? And then it's more to your point at the beginning of the conversation, the kind of the challenge, and just this then also starts to dictate the future state, is that we're putting people in charge of these machines that don't really know how to use them, so they're not getting the best out of them.
And this is something that I think people, and again, this is now where the state sales is. There is birth, there is life, there is death. Companies need to accept that. Okay, let me explain. So, as you know, I work with companies, not my current one, but others. I've heard like, okay, we want to add 6-7 figures MRR. And I'm like, great. Why? And they're like, well, why not? And I'm like, okay, so you're telling me you want all this money, but you don't know what you're going to do with it? And that's where a lot of people are beginning to ask, like, okay, but why? Companies are scrambling to answer that question because look, like, okay, let's say that in 3 to 5 years, the startup started, and within 5 to 10, it's acquired. There are entries and there are exits. What people are becoming more and more accustomed to asking is, what is the exit point for me? like with all my newfound relationship with all the startup founders I deal with, first question is, what do you want? And when are you going to ride off into the sunset? If they cannot answer those two questions, I walk up. I walk. I'm not even going to tolerate the conversation. Because that's so critical now.
I completely agree, and I think that would almost be in terms of not only startups. It's if you're working for a large organization, you're trying to build out a territory or build out a particular account plan. Some of the questions are why, not so much why in terms of MRR, but why are we going after these organizations? And I reflect on some of my career, well, because they're the gold standard brand. Well, okay, well that's all well and good, but can we actually? Do we have a cat's hell and chance of even winning this, or would it be better to maybe look down a level, not necessarily the sexy brands, but the brands that genuinely need our help and probably going to pay us maybe pay us less, but more profitable.
Right. And they're like, now you're just logo chasing, bro. Like, dude, you're making 6 to 7 figures between you and maybe half a dozen co-founders. And your response to me is, hey, can you double it? My response to you is, okay. What problems do you have that you're not telling me about financially that makes you believe doubling it solve your problems? What deal have you made with the money? Because I can't help you unless you're being honest with me, and you asking to double 6 figures by hiring a consultant means you fundamentally do not understand what that actually means and entails.
Which then I guess comes back to the interesting world and kind of SaaS sales. And I know Marcus Calky's got a view on this as well. Is that I think you mentioned it earlier in terms of the medium to longer term relationships versus just stop chasing net new logos and churning after 12 to 18 months, because fundamentally you've reflects on this funny TikTok video I saw earlier today in terms of a CSM sitting in mute on a sales call, or basically the seller, probably because they're under pressure to do so because they need to hit their number, is promising the world in terms of what can be delivered. And this CSM's thinking, Christ, I've got to deal with this for the next 18 months. And we're probably going to lose it after 12 because we failed to deliver what we were working on, what we promised, versus maybe nurturing your existing clients to be a little bit more successful and stickier with what you've got.
Right. And this is where the new logos versus maintaining relationship conversation, one of which, this is where me and my current team really agree, is we got good pipeline, we can build more, and we're going to. But first and foremost is, hey, let's turn our current customer base, let's see if we can add a 0 between now and next quarter. That would be great. That would be awesome if they could convince all of them to pay us more money. Because you gotta manage that. And it's like, so many of these founders that I've ran into from startups over the years have just basically said, no, I want net new logos. Once they pay me the first time, I don't care. And I'm like, dude, you're cutting your foot off halfway through a race to get that evaluation. Let's say that they're eyeing 100 million exit, which, that's not all that much anymore, not all that difficult, right? If you hit like 5 figures MRR and a 20 to 40x multiplier to the right VC, not at all hard to do. So you're telling me that you believe that constantly churning and burning customers within 6 to 12 months, or maybe 18 if you're lucky, is what's going to get you that evaluation? To which I respond with, have you ever talked to the money? One of the first questions that any smart money that I've ever ran into asks is, what is the average customer life span? Because look, if I have to spend nearly, half the money that I'm giving you in trying to keep or like maintain the current levels of revenue, I've lost. I mean, you have to spend 10%, lost. Which
I guess comes. It all comes full circle back to it is, sales isn't broken. I think it's just going through a reset of its own. But it's been it's always been the pre-COVID, dare I say it. It's kind of not been, it's been the forgotten child, because fundamentally sales are sales. You come into the office, you do your 9 to 5 or your 8 to 6 or whatever it is, you bash the phone, you hit your numbers, you leave home, happy days, and everyone was kind of just accepting their lot to a certain,
lots in life
to a certain extent. And it never really went, HR functions would go through transformations, finance functions would go through transformation, IT functions would go to this. Even the business might go through a transformation program per se. For those listening, I'm doing inverted commas, but the sales function was always kind of, well, you're just sales. You're just
right. You go to a sales training and you get on the phones. Hurry up.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I also now feel, or I believe, that this needs to be a CEO, MD, board level discussion and awareness, that you need to kind of understand without a sales engine, you are, irrespective of whether you're a Salesforce or you're a startup, you are fundamentally a nothing. And if you accept the research that the seller has been squeezed more and more out of the process because of the pressure that SDRs have been put under in terms of get more out, get more dials out, get more ineffectual dials out to the wrong people. That's why cold calling doesn't work, because it's the majority giving the minority a bad name in it. The same with outreach on email, the same with social selling, the same.
It's like, I'm all for touch points. Like, my current stuff has at least 6 to maybe 12 touch points in total between each lead and each account. Fine. But I know I actually have value to bring them. I'm not dialing into the ether for dialing into the ether's sake. And you have so many of these reps that believe, look, put me on Connect and Sell and I'll get, my numbers, I'll hit it. And the problem with that is, no. Connect and Sell tells you what its greatest function.
Yeah.
It's an entropy machine. It tells you where you need to focus within the chaos. Then you work on that list, and then you dial off that list. Hopefully get some verified leads from the Beard and Ryan. And then boom, bada bing, you're now actually going to hit your numbers. But if you're telling me that in the modern era, between spam filters, between call blocks, and between the GDPR and God only knows what else the European Union is going to come up with next, God help us all, that they're going to do, and that's going to work, you haven't been paying attention in the last 2 years. You just haven't.
Sure. I mean, you and I could. I know you're being reserved in terms of.
Yes, I am.
Some of your viewpoints based on the call we had the other night. But the thing is that an SDR necessarily can't solve this. But what would be, picking up on your earlier points around kind of the two kind of, I guess, types from a future state of what you believe based on your experience thus far in the world that you, and especially coming from a technical perspective, what would your advice be to kind of SDRs kind of thinking about getting into this, or in their current state, notwithstanding the grass isn't always necessarily greener, but what should they be doing to better themselves?
Fee FIFO says it best. If I cannot, from the C-suite or VPs or directors, understand my TAM within the first time of us having a real sales conversation, I walk, and that's it. But that's what it boils down to is, you want to be successful, you need to understand, your org needs to understand your TAM and let you at it. Between that and anything else, there's other points, but if they do not understand their TAM, you can't help them. Because again, firing the ether, you'll get some hits, but that's not what sales is. Sales isn't one-off. No. Sales is reliable process, time and time again. And I will always argue with founders who said, well, I did it once or twice, doesn't that mean? I'm like, no, it does not. Gut luck.
Awesome. Wes, I always enjoy talking to you and your insight. If people want to connect with you, find out more, learn more about what it is that you do, where can I point them to? Where's the best place to find you?
Right now it's LinkedIn or WhatsApp, because again, I'm just on there. Or the Discord.
Discord. Okay, I'll put the links to Discord and your profile in here. Thank you so much for that. I highly recommend if you want to learn more about what Wes can do to help you. He comes at it from a different angle, so he will challenge your thought process. But I think in this world that's a good thing to do. Wes, really appreciate your time and thought this afternoon, this evening, wherever I am in the world, London.
Exactly. Isn't it like lunchtime?
Who am I?
Exactly.
And as always, to my amazing guests, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to be on it, you know what to do. If you want to recommend people to be on it. But otherwise, wherever you are in the world, Wes is giving a big thumbs up. Wes, thank you.